If you're moving to St. Louis and looking into the pros, the cons, doing your research on some things to consider before you move here, good news for you, that is what we're talking about today in this video on the pros and cons of living in St. Louis, Missouri. So let's get into it. Hey there, welcome to the channel or welcome back. My name is Jacob Peistrup, and real quick, I gotta throw this in here. If you're moving to the St. Louis area and you're looking for help with the process of buying a house, navigating this crazy real estate market, and figuring out the right fit for you in the St. Louis area, give me a call, shoot me a text, or send me an email because that is what I am here for. I work in real estate and I love the reach outs that I get every single week from new people who are coming to the St. Louis area to figure out where they fit in, which area they want to live in, and navigating the St. Louis real estate market these days. So if there's anything I can do for you, give me a call, shoot me a text, send me an email, whatever works for you, and let's get in touch and make it happen. So let's get into some pros and cons of living in St. Louis. Couple of pros, couple of cons that you want to think about before you move to St. Louis. Now, I'm not going to do the same fluffy stuff as everyone else, like some pros. Oh, we have good food, we have free attractions, we have the arch. No, that doesn't really matter. I'm going to talk about the actual pros and the actual cons of living in St. Louis that you want to think about that maybe haven't really popped into your mind about, some aspects of living in St. Louis that you want to be aware of before you make the move here. So let's get into it. Now, the first thing you got to know, and this could kind of go both ways, I'm going to list it as more of a con than a pro, is that a lot of people in St. Louis are originally from St. Louis. There's a lot of people who live here who are from here. They were born here, they grew up here. They might have moved away for college or for a couple years for work because that's very common, but they always move back to St. Louis. So you end up with this city where you have a lot of people who are originally from there. We're not a city with a bunch of new people in it like Austin or Nashville or Los Angeles where you have a lot of new people moving in. St. Louis is an area that has a lot of people who are actually from here. And like I said, a lot of people will move away and then come back to St. Louis. I did that. I was born in St. Louis, moved away for my whole childhood, moved back for high school, moved away for college, moved back. So it's you move out, you move away, you move back. A lot of people will leave and then come back to St. Louis. You have a lot of people in St. Louis who are from St. Louis. Now, with that being said, we do have a couple big drivers in the area that bring new people in. One of those is education. We got WashU, we got SLU, some great universities. We have a lot of students that move here and will oftentimes stay here post-graduation for their job or because they like the St. Louis area and they want to stay here. That's one way we get a lot of new people. The second way we get a lot of new people is through jobs. We have a lot of big employers in the St. Louis area, lots of big companies, a couple of which are headquartered in St. Louis, which helps, bring new people into the St. Louis market. So there's a lot of big employers in St. Louis. A couple of those are BJC Healthcare, Anheuser-Busch, Boeing, Edward Jones, WashU. A lot of people work at WashU. SSM Health, Mercy Hospitals, lots of people in medicine. So those are some of the big employers in the area. But like I said, there's a lot of jobs that bring people to St. Louis. But there still are a lot of people that are originally from St. Louis. So everyone knows each other. Lots of people will know each other from high school or from college, or they grew up together. We'll always ask, where'd you go to high school? Which a lot of other cities do that. St. Louis is one of them. So it kind of has this small town mentality, even though we're a city of almost 3 million people. Everyone knows each other. People are from St. Louis. So that's one thing that I've heard a couple people say who move here that kind of shocks them. They expect St. Louis to be this, thriving city with a bunch of people moving in. Everyone is new to the city. No one really knows each other. In St. Louis, that's not exactly the case because a lot of people do know each other because a lot of people are from St. Louis. Next up, pro. Affordability. Affordability of buying a house or renting in St. Louis. You get more for your dollar. You get more bang for your buck. Your money goes further in St. Louis than in a lot of other cities, especially if you're moving here from the East Coast or the West Coast, one of those much more expensive cities. St. Louis is going to be a lot more affordable when it comes to either buying or renting. Now, it definitely depends on where you're moving from. So if you're moving from a more expensive city like Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Boston, DC, New York, yeah, St. Louis is way more affordable, way cheaper. You can get a bigger house for cheaper in St. Louis. But if you're moving from a rural town in central Missouri or you're coming here from South Dakota, yeah, St. Louis is probably going to be more expensive with, what you can get for your money. So it depends on where you're moving from. But like I said, if you're moving from a bigger city on the East Coast or West Coast or some places in the Midwest, St. Louis is more affordable, which is always great. That is a huge pro of living in St. Louis. Like I've talked about this before on the channel. I went to college in Boston, Northeastern University. I actually have it on right now. Boston is expensive. Like a one bedroom apartment will be like $2,500, $2,800 a month to rent, and for buying, it's just as crazy with prices. St. Louis is much more reasonable. You get more for your money. It's a lot more affordable to live in and to break into the housing market if you're buying your first home or you're buying a condo, whatever it is. St. Louis is a lot easier to buy in and live in because there is a lower cost of living, much more affordable, and that is a great reason to live in St. Louis. Next up, con of living in St. Louis. This depends on where you live. Not everyone in St. Louis is a big fan of the public education system. Now, as a realtor, I have to be careful what I say just because there are rules and regulations about what I can and can't say with stuff like crime, safety, school districts, that kind of stuff. But going off of some public lists, US News ranks us 30th in the nation for public education, and that's Missouri, the whole state. World Population Review ranks Missouri 36th out of 50, so not looking great there either. Ranking metro areas, not states, there was a list on niche.com that I looked at, and this is ranking different metro areas by their public education systems. I went down to like 70, didn't see St. Louis. I did see Columbia, Missouri, so Columbia actually ranked 28th for public education. St. Louis wasn't really on that list. So people don't always like the public education system. Again, that depends on which district you live in, which municipality you pay taxes to. So again, it depends because St. Louis has a lot of school districts, but that is one thing that I've heard people say and that I've seen people talk about that, that St. Louis doesn't compare as great in that regard to some other cities. So again, having a real estate license, I can't really give opinions on that. I always recommend looking at publicly available lists like the ones that I just mentioned. Look into the different school systems and the different municipalities if you're interested in doing research on that. But that is one thing that I've heard people say that they're not a big fan of with living in St. Louis. So that could be a con for you depending on where you live, which school district you're going to. If you're interested in public schools, I mean, if you're going to private schools, that's a different thing. But for public schools, that is one thing you might want to consider before moving to St. Louis. Pro, similar to affordability and lower cost of living, is lower taxes. Now, Missouri is not one of the states with the lowest taxes in the country. We are not a zero tax state, so we do have taxes, but we're not at the top of the list as far as how high our taxes are compared to some other states like Illinois when it comes to how expensive we are for taxes. Again, totally depends on you and where you're moving from, because if you're moving from a much higher tax state, then yeah, you're gonna be relieved to live in St. Louis or live in Missouri where we have lower taxes. If you're moving from a state that already has low taxes, St. Louis and Missouri could be higher for you. For property taxes, we're pretty much on par with the average for the country, so not exactly low, but we're not really high either. State and local taxes, again, depends on where you live, which municipality. We can be on the higher end of the spectrum for that, depending on where you live. Like if you live in the city and there's an extra 1%, depends on where you're moving from, again, and where in St. Louis you're living. So depends. We're not exactly a lower tax state, but compared to where you might be moving from, the taxes you pay in Missouri or in St. Louis could be lower than where you live now. So that could be a pro for you. Next up, a con, taking a more serious turn and unfortunately more controversial, is racism. Let's be real, St. Louis has a history of racism, racial inequality, and segregation. I mean, it is very much tied into the history of St. Louis and Missouri as a state in the history of this country. There are issues that still exist to this day, things that are still being fixed and things that we need to work on as a city, but let's be real, it happens. St. Louis has made the news and still does make the news for some not so great stuff in this country with racism and racial equality. This is not supposed to be political or controversial, but I know some people are going to skew it that way. You can look at me, I don't have the perspective or the ability to have that perspective on the racial issues of this country or this city the same way that a person of color would, but I can tell you, I've seen it happen. I can't say that I really experienced it or that I have the full grasp of it, but it does happen. You want a real life example of how this is real in St. Louis? I went to a high school in an affluent suburb of St. Louis. Not gonna name the school. I've said it in other videos so you can look it up. We've made the news for some really shitty stuff with the stuff that kids do and say at that school that I went to. There was a Snapchat group scandal. There would be kids saying shit at football games and slurs that they should not be saying at all that would get them into a lot of trouble. And, give us that negative spotlight as a school in the St. Louis area. You hear about stuff like, the redlining and the Del Mar Divide in St. Louis that still exists. There are issues in St. Louis that I'm not going to try to say that they're fixed or that we're the perfect city. We have issues as far as, the racism and the racial inequality goes that is still being talked about and still, needs to be fixed to this day. Again, not trying to make this video political or controversial. I know that is a serious thing to bring up in a pros and cons video, but I'm not going to beat around the bush or try to pretend that it doesn't exist. It very much does. People have asked about it, so I might as well just bring it up in the video because you can't deny that St. Louis has made the news for some shitty stuff in the past. So there's a con to think about. Again, I cannot have that perspective. I'm not trying to pretend that I do. You can look at my skin color. It's a different situation for me personally than for other people in St. Louis. So again, there's that to think about. I'll be waiting for all the hate comments in the comment section below, but there you go. Now next up, because I don't want to end this video on a negative note, is there's a lot of new development and new construction going on throughout St. Louis, and this is both in the suburbs and in the city. So you got new communities, new subdivisions, new commercial space, office buildings, apartment buildings, retail space. There's a ton of new stuff being built in St. Louis that is great for economic growth, activity, opportunity, tons of new stuff in St. Louis. Some people might think we're kind of this dead city with nothing going on, no new stuff happening, and I can tell you right now that is absolutely not the case. That is not true at all. St. Louis has a lot of new stuff happening, new stuff being built. There is a lot of new development that I think is great for the city. And especially great if you're considering moving to St. Louis. I mean, like I said, there's a ton of stuff. They're building a new soccer stadium. There's tons of new apartment buildings and complexes, condos, retail space, office space. If you're in the city, you'll see it all over. Downtown, Midtown, Central West End, Soulard, it's all over the place. And same goes for the suburbs. In St. Louis County, St. Charles County, in the suburbs, there is just as much new development and new growth going on, which is great for the city. Now, are people moving outside the city and further into the suburbs? Yes, they are. That is one reason why there's a lot of new development happening outside the city, further out west into the suburbs. But there is still a lot of new stuff happening in the city of St. Louis. In the urban center, where you got everything going on, lots of economic activity, there is still a lot of new growth, new construction, and new opportunity that's really gonna be good for St. Louis, I think, over the next 5 to 10 years as far as where we're going as a city. So again, lots of great stuff happening, lots of new stuff going on in St. Louis that I think is really going to benefit the city and those who move to St. Louis over the coming years. So I hope that was helpful for providing some context, a little bit of insight and perspective as far as the pros and cons of living in St. Louis. Definitely some stuff you want to think about both with pros and cons before moving to St. Louis. So I hope this was helpful. Again, if there's anything I can do for you to provide value to help you with the process of moving to St. Louis, relocating here, buying a house in this crazy real estate market, please give me a call, shoot me a text, or send me an email. That's what I do for a living. I love the reach outs, love talking to new people, especially my YouTube viewers. So anything I do for you, give me a call, shoot me a text, and let's make it happen. Let's get in touch if I can do anything at all to help you out. So thank you for watching. I appreciate you, I appreciate the support, and I will see you in the next video. Hope you take care and have a great day.